Toward the end of April this year, I made a very important choice. I was going to stop procrastinating and learn to make games, no matter what it took. Since then, I've made significant progress, and my vision of releasing a full-scale game is now closer than ever. Along the way, there have been plenty of challenges, including having to navigate a couple months of near total burnout, but I'm happy to say that Lost Resolve is back on track. If you want to know more about the history of this project, feel free to check out my last video. But for now, let's get right into what's new, what's better, and what's coming up next. Before taking a look at some of the coding challenges, let's look at the creative side of things. Unfortunately, I haven't heard from the artist I was working with in quite a while, even after checking in a few weeks ago. I assume they must be extremely busy with other projects, or maybe there's something else going on. But in any case, I have to keep the project moving forward, so in the meantime, I've resolved to do the best I can with a combination of free assets and my own art. As I've mentioned in past videos, I don't have a lot of experience with art, but as with game dev, that's no reason to avoid trying. After a couple of horrifically bad attempts which I'm too embarrassed to show in this video, I finally made this portrait of Soul that I'm pretty happy with. I've been wanting some art to use on the main menu and for my Steam assets, and for now, I think this will do just fine. And who knows, if I don't get back in contact with my artist soon, I may attempt to create some environmental art and tile sets myself and see how it goes. For the time being, I added a starry parallax background to the hub world, as well as some trees, both of which are free assets from itch.io, and I'll link in the description. I also used a canvas modulate to darken them so they fit the mood of the level. The background music for the Somber Sepulchre levels was a very short placeholder, so I decided to extend it. And wow, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Take a listen. The feeling of zooming through the stage with the melancholic background music is such a vibe, and I feel it goes a long way towards giving the game its own identity. Alright, on to the features. One of the things I knew would be important was a dialogue handler, so I brainstormed a way to store and iterate dialogue efficiently. I settled on storing cutscenes as string arrays, and prefixing lines with the character's name if the person speaking needed to change. Essentially, the script will check dialogue lines for a character's name followed by a colon, and if that's the case, it'll make that person the one talking, trim the prefix out of the string, and display the dialogue line. If the character speaking doesn't change, it'll just continue to cycle through dialogue lines until it reaches the end of the cutscene. Speaking of cutscenes, there are now animations and a sound effect when you unlock one of these translucent platforms, which should help communicate to the player that they unlocked a way to progress. Here's what it looks like. Another important feature was the level completion screen, which now displays your stats one at a time with some sound effects. I even tested out a scoring system, but no one seemed to like the idea, so instead you just get a ranking based on your time. Save slots have now been added to the game as well. I've been using a save system from this tutorial by GWiz, which I'll link in the description, and adding different slots was pretty much as simple as adding a save slot setting to the game's config file, and simply updating it when a different slot was chosen. Deleting slots was also surprisingly easy to figure out. One of my favorite things about this system is that, after completing the demo, you can go back into the main menu to see what your final in-game time was. A really nice feature if you like to speedrun. One of the most requested features for the game was controller support, which wasn't a thing in the initial Steam demo. As some of you pointed out, it is very simple to add bindings for a controller in Godot's input settings menu, but the challenge comes when you want to make these controls remappable. For Lost Resolve's remappable controls, I started with this tutorial from Dash Nothing, which I'll link in the description. It was an excellent foundation which stores the key bindings in a config file. However, the code only accepted mouse and keyboard inputs, so I needed to get it to recognize controller actions as well. This was relatively simple in theory, but for some reason Godot uses extremely long strings for their controller input names, and there's no way I was going to be storing something like this as a key binding in the config file. So after a bit of troubleshooting, I came up with the solution of storing controller inputs as their respective button IDs. 0 for the Xbox A button, 2 for the X button, and so forth. And then I made an array of input event names for whenever I needed to display the names on screen. This turned out to be a great solution, but it's also worth noting that the right and left triggers are recognized as joypad motions and not button presses, so I wrote some extra code to detect those specific inputs and just stored them as RT and LT. I also added visual hints to the tutorial area, which display the actions you can perform and their corresponding inputs. To do this, I am constantly keeping track of whether the last button pressed was a keyboard and mouse or a controller input. These hints will grab the corresponding input name from the config file and update the label depending on what device you're currently using. So even if you launched the level using keyboard and mouse, if you switch to controller after the fact, the hints will update immediately. Right now, I'm just displaying text for the controller input names, but I may switch these to icons later on. Finally, I added controller vibration and an optional 0.75 zoom option to the settings menu. I've had a couple people comment that it might be difficult to react to obstacles with the default zoom of the camera, and while I think it feels pretty good with the current zoom and look ahead, I want to make sure that players have options at their disposal to enjoy the game to their liking, and the zoomed out camera does give you a lot more time to react to upcoming obstacles. Right now, this option does result in some horrendous mixels, but in the future, I may create separate background resolutions to make this feature better. In a moment, I'll get into what's next for Lost Resolve, but first, I want to take a moment to thank Brilliant for, once again, sponsoring this video. They've been an excellent pairing for my game dev content, and their support has helped make this game possible. If you're not familiar with Brilliant, think of it as an easy way to learn about extremely relevant topics via engaging and interactive lessons. In particular, their courses on math, data analysis, and programming are all directly adjacent to game development. Beyond that, you can use Brilliant anywhere on your phone, and it's a great habit to replace doom scrolling if you're looking for something to do. Especially if you're looking to get into game development, I'd recommend trying out their Thinking in Code course to lay out the foundation for your endeavors. It condenses a lot of vital concepts into easily digestible lessons that may save you hours of trial and error if you have no background in programming. Or if you're more experienced, the advanced programming courses like Applied Python could be more your speed. As a bonus, if you're working with Godot, you'll probably find that Python and GDScript have a lot in common. To give Brilliant a try, check out brilliant.org/Swinkly. You'll get a 30-day free trial and a 20% discount on an annual subscription with this link, so check it out and start making learning a daily habit. Alright, we've gone over what's new in Lost Resolve, so what's next? Long story short, an updated demo is coming very soon on Steam and itch.io. I'm going to be working on updating my Steam page with recent gameplay and screenshots, since everything on there is very old, and polishing up the game for the next demo. The game's in good shape right now, but I think it needs to be a little bit longer, as skilled players will be able to beat Somber Sepulchre 1 and 2 in less than 5 minutes. Potentially, this may mean a third action stage in Somber Sepulchre, as well as more story progression before heading to Relegated Ruins. I've also discovered that there are still a few bugs that need to be addressed before I can put out another official demo, like this one that one of my friends encountered during a playtest. Wish me luck. I'm only just realizing this, but pretty much every major roadblock I was concerned about coding-wise, like controller support and save slots, has now been fully implemented so I can move full speed ahead onto level design, story, and art. A little while ago, I announced that it was my goal to have a minimum viable product finished by year's end. And while I may miss that goal by a bit, I now have virtually all the game's important systems in place, as well as a much more efficient workflow, and that frees me up to focus mostly on the game's content. Plus, I have a week off from work at the beginning of 2025, and you'd be sorely mistaken if you don't think I plan to spend 8 to 10 hours a day on the game during that time. I've already rewritten several of the game's important cutscenes, and I'll be continuing to expand the story and world of Lost Resolve. In addition to this, I think I'll be adding more collectibles to the game, possibly in the form of paper fragments that give a deeper dive into the story. And speaking of collectibles, there will also be a reward for getting all S ranks, So look forward to that. It's also come to my attention that levels would benefit from more unique gimmicks. In that vein, I've already added falling platforms to Somber Sepulchre 2, and I'll try to think of some other interesting obstacles to give the other stages more variety. I'll continue to work on the game's soundtrack, and I want to hold everything to the same standard of quality as the current main menu and Somber Sepulchre theme. My goal is to have the gameplay, the story, and the music all feel incredibly cohesive, and to immerse the player in the beautiful and mysterious world of the Forlorn Dream. So for now, it'll be full steam ahead at turning Lost Resolve into a full-length platforming adventure, and I'm aiming to release the game spring or summer of next year. With that said, even though I see releasing a full game on Steam as a monumental goal, I also see it as just the beginning. I've learned so much from this journey so far, and I can't wait to dive into brand new concepts, genres, and worlds. With any luck, there will be more after Lost Resolve. Much more. And I can't wait to see what's next. As a final note, I just want to remind all of you to believe in your ideas. Some of you will know that just a couple of months ago, I felt completely stuck on this game, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't seem to get anything done. If that's where you're at, please know that the feeling is temporary. If you have an idea you're passionate about, do me a favor and refuse to give up on it. I wholeheartedly believe that's the only thing standing in the way of creating the game you've always dreamed of. I'll see you guys in the next video.